the role of imagination. The role of imagination in kind of a deeper level of embodied cognition, but also we'll stay with imagination as role-playing, as putting myself in a situation that I've never been in before, or imagining what it would feel like to be somebody else, a fictional character, a political figure, or whatever that might be. But the role plays or the actual exercises will be more focused on the what Edwin calls the sexier version of imagination, where we're more role-playing rather than philosophizing. But I can't not mention the other aspect of imagination, so it will be there in the presentation, but it will not be part of the rest of the discussion. Well, obviously, as much as we have control over it, but I'm not sure what that would look like. And the risk that I'm taking is that I'm complexifying something that could come across as confusing. And again, maybe when we try that week, hopefully your feedback will be helpful. Is this too complex and confusing?
Yeah, that's about it. Maybe there, and just any comments from last week, any questions about last week, just a sentence or two.
No, I think
okay.
I have more thoughts about this week, but
well, at the end we can go into more depth on imaginative empathy. I just want to get a little taste, to start the ball rolling here.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, no, that's great. Wendy, you want to go next?
Nothing particular to add. I'm enjoying this process very much in terms of thinking deeper about each of, everything that we're covering. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And anything from last week? Any thought about that? You had given the suggestions of the what do you call it? The objectives, and I did put that in there. So appreciate those suggestions.
Yeah, I felt it was important to start quite broad and then narrow down with objectives. So a wider objective first, just the order, and in it as fewer words as possible. Minimize the words. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks, Kara.
I have nothing exciting to share, but I am excited to be here.
Great. Crystal?
Yeah, I just love being here with each of you every week. And last night we had an interesting, it's a semi-empathy circle where we were talking about vulnerability, and that being the great vehicle, as DJ beautifully coined that term. I loved it, to empathy. And for me, it just is bringing up, as I'm continuing to ponder blocks that I believe are really bridges to empathy, that when we're connecting with people empathically, are we dealing with the past, present, or future self person? And are they still stuck in a narrative? And that those are blocks, and that we can try to bridge the connection to with our own vulnerability and meeting them where they are. So I'm just continuing to explore that and looking forward to continuing the conversation with Lou about that as well.
Oh, great, thanks. Colin?
Well, me and you, Adam, met earlier in the week. We had a good discussion, and we talked a little bit about the session one, some comments on that. One of those comments being the title Other-Oriented Empathy was another way of expressing that. Sounds a bit clunky to me. I haven't come up with an alternative. But it's swirling around in the back of my mind. Yes, I'm to review the website as a question. So when we talk about it next week, when we meet next week, I can give you something there. So I'm kind of moving away from the self-empathy piece because Bianca got that covered, and I can add value other places. And yes, I read the articles, the active listening one. I particularly was really impressed by that. I could really identify strongly with that as a coach, and is that I want to be as a coach, but also as an empathic listener. And maybe that'll come up in the empathy circles today. Thank you.
Okay, so Colin and I are meeting on Tuesdays to kind of do an overview of the training, sort of to debrief it. And Kara is going to be joining us too. So yay! So more of the overview and kind of a place where I can have a sounding board too to share ideas. So Jenna, hey Jenna.
I read the articles and it was nice to connect with Carl Rogers a little bit more. And Violetta, I'd like to know more about what the deep part of fantasy is that you're not sharing with us. And I wondered if anybody had thoughts about altruism and empathy, then would be interested in exploring that with me. We talked also about the benefits of empathy, and it doesn't seem to be anywhere in the 7 sessions. So just remind you about that. And thanks so much for being here. And I'll be disappearing and appearing.
Okay, thanks. And just we have the facets of empathic way of being. We can always add more facets. So vulnerability, you know, the ones what you're just talking about, Jana. So they can be added like at future session, a whole session on, you know, on those different topics too. So it can be expandable. DJ.
Okay, hi. Gosh, I'm just kind of blown away right now because I really listened to and read the article, Carl Rogers' article. And, you know, I can't help but say, I really am not comfortable with the whole idea of defining empathy within a therapist's point of view. It's just really uncomfortable for me. Because I don't subscribe to psychology. I'm an anthropologist who looks at it from a different point of view. So I'm just kind of blown away right now, trying to figure out congruence and the meaning of self and this relationship with others in a non-therapeutic relationship. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And this is we'll have empathy circle of space to explore all those topics. So great. Lou?
So I'd like to start with an apology to Crystal for not getting to the blocks document and being able to do more work on it this week. It is on my list and I had a really busy week. Next week will be much better. So I will definitely get to it then. Yeah, but I feel bad that, you know, I said actually last week at this meeting that I would get to it and I didn't. So, but I care about it and I will get to it. Yeah, I'm also curious about Violetta's deeper empathy. I would like to understand that more. I'm curious about that. And I am also feel strongly about not complexifying the course, this empathy course, too much so that people wind up feeling confused by it as opposed to enabled by it. And I think one of the, I think that the our guard against that will be connecting the different things we learn about to the empathy circle process. You know, that's the grounding piece, you know, because the question of there's this idea and then how do you use it or where do you use it? Where does it fit will be a very grounding piece, hopefully. Yeah, do I have any other thoughts? Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's it.
Okay, and so this is session 2. We call it other-oriented empathy, and I put a lot of work into session 1 because that really sets up the structure and kind of gives an introduction to all the different parts. So I haven't done a whole lot with this topic of other-oriented empathy. It is that Carl Rogers paper, I think, describes it fairly well in terms of the literature and so forth. That's really a foundational definition of that he's giving there. And so what I wanted to do was show a slideshow, which was basically the first part of the session 1 on the other-oriented empathy. So I'm just going to go through that sort of a recap. Hopefully you saw all this already, but I'm just going to go over it again because this is what I want to build on. So for this session, there would be this maybe a recap of this section, and then adding a little bit more depth. So we have here, we'll take this is the other-oriented empathy. And let me see, I got my slide check. So this is the facet: empathy, other-oriented empathy. And this is usually when people talk about empathy, this is what they're meaning is other-oriented empathy, how, as an individual, you empathize with someone else. And this is, we had sent out that paper by Rogers, as well as that article on active listening, that paper, Empathic and Unappreciated Way of Being. And this is, that Rogers really developed this definition and the active listening process in a client-therapist relationship. So he would, from already in the 50s, maybe in the late 40s, he was sort of developing this process where he found that if he just listened to individuals, that was one of the most healing things that he could do. And then he was able to sort of articulate the benefits of that, and also how the process worked. And he did that over the next 30 or 40 years. And then he has this quote, which is a definition. He has multiple definitions of how he defined empathy. And here he's sort of defining it in a one-to-one listening, sort of in a therapist sort of context, or with any person, and that could be therapy or not therapy. It says empathy is the listener's effort to hear the other person deeply, accurately, and non-judgmentally. Empathy involves skillful, reflective listening that clarifies and amplifies the person's own experiencing meaning without imposing the listener's own material. So I have this model, or this painting, Mother and Child by Mary Cassatt, that I used in the other slideshow or video, just to sort of model this in a human connection, kind of taking it out of the therapeutic. So here's a mother listening to her daughter. And so she's we're just having to imagine this situation, what's happening here. But I think it's sort of the intimacy and openness sort of gets conveyed by the painting itself. But the child is sharing, the mother is listening, and so she's sensing into the experience of the daughter, and the daughter is sharing different feelings that are coming up for her, and just being very present and open. And the daughter is maybe telling some stories about what happened during her day, and she's expressing different feelings. So maybe she's expressing happiness or sadness or anger or shyness, or just all these different feelings that she's expressing. And then just another quote from Rogers, since he's the foundation that we're sort of building our definition from, is he says empathy is saying to someone, I'm trying to be a companion to you in your search and your exploration. I want to know, am I with you? Is this the way it seems to you? Is this the thing you're trying to express? Is this the meaning it has for you? So in a sense, I'm saying, I'm walking with you step by step, and I want to make sure I am with you. Am I with you? So that's a little bit of my understanding about empathy. And again, that's what we do in the empathy circle, just like with the mother and child. We have a speaker, and the active listening is saying, hey, I'm going to be a companion to you as the speaker as you explore, your insights, your feelings, your thoughts, and I'm going to be there, moment to moment, sensing into and hearing you. And then also the empathic reflection kind of helps to just deepen that process and support the more accurate empathy to make sure that we really hear the other person. And so again, this is, people would generally call empathy in general. I'm calling it other-oriented empathy, because we have self-empathy, we have imaginative empathy, and we have other types of empathy. So we need to differentiate, for clarity that. So that's why it's, yeah, Lou.
I would say that everyone in the circle senses into the speaker. So everyone should be listening empathically to the speaker. The difference between the active listener is that they verbally reflect back what they understand the speaker is saying. But I think the instructions to everyone in the circle should be that they are listening with empathy to the speaker.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So everybody is empathizing with the speaker, and it's one level or another. The silent listener is also empathizing with the active listener, right? There's this empathy going on where the active listener is trying to share, they're trying to reflect, and you can sort of sense into their experience of trying to reflect. So there is empathy going on, between all participants, for sure. Yeah. And I would say it's maybe a bit more intense because the active listener is, doing that reflection. So they're having to be really present. It's a little bit harder to be sort of detached and kind of off thinking. Silent listeners, sometimes I'm off thinking about other things too. So, Wendy?
I'm just wondering what you mean by this expression, sensing into.
Sensing is listening, but with your full senses. It's like feeling, using all of your senses, your felt sense, like, oh, I'm feeling the energy from the other person. So it's, you could, I say feeling into or sensing into, because sensing is like a broader, has more qualities of sensations, the feelings. Or you could say sight, you're seeing the person, you're sensing into through the sight, you're sensing through, if you were near them, you could sort of smell them, I guess. You'd have that, if they're really in fear, you'd maybe be smelling the fear or maybe something else. So I don't know if does that sort of make sense? Just another word for feeling, but a bit broader term.
I think it is something that is worthwhile to expand on. It's not a phrase used in common parlance in many countries of the world, and I think if we use phrases in a course, I think it's useful to unpack them and make sure that people have a shared understanding. So we probably all understand what that phrase means, but I think it's useful as part of this definition course to make sure we do define our terms. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. And you had mentioned that too, that maybe it's a term that one culture may not use so much, like in the UK may not use the term, maybe it's a Californian sort of a term or something like that. So I did make a note about that to define it and unpack it. Yeah, Jana?
Well, I just wondered if you're attached to the sensing into and to offer feels and perceives the experience of the speaker, if that would be acceptable. But I'm just, or you could add it.
Yeah, so that's something to explore. It's like, how do we sort of define, what words do we use to describe that phenomenon of, it could be I'm just curious, what do you think about just feeling into? You're feeling into feelings is a bit redundant, but
Well, and I would say feelings are not the only thing I'm sensing. So feeling into works. Sensing into is a little bit broader for me. I also wanted to say that the what I was trying to emphasize with what I said before is that the empathy is not only offered verbally, it can also be offered silently, and that's what the silent listeners are doing, is offering empathy silently. And so yeah, I just wanted to, that the silent listeners are not passive, and they're also, I mean, they have a role of listening into the person just as much as the active listener.
yeah, sometimes people say, oh, they're the passive listeners, and I try to get away from that. You're
Yeah.
silently listening, exactly.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm just hearing, make sure that everyone understands that everyone is supposed to be empathizing. I mean, the silent listeners are empathizing as well. It's just not only the active listener.
Well, and the idea that empathy can be offered silently. It's not always with words.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd say most of the time, it's not
Yeah,
with words.
it's probably like 90% silent. As we kind of move through the day, we sense the people around us, and we
Yeah.
don't even say anything, and we're sort of like empathizing with them. Yeah, great. Okay. The next thing is want to do a little bit of a test. So I did want to get this picture in just to let everyone know this is the kind of stuff we do with the empathy tent. You know, we set up this empathy tent, offer listening out on the streets, and you'll see that there's this test that we do, and we have a lot of fun with it. People seem to really enjoy it, and this is a test of being able to sense into and read people's emotions. And I'm just using the same ones. I'll probably use different ones. There's 36 faces in this test, and I'm going to put in some new ones so that you wouldn't have seen this already. But here the test is like, what feelings, or do you think this person, what best describes what this person is feeling? And I don't know, they say it's a panic. Does that sound about right to you? Did I see? Yeah, I see. No, yes. I'm saying yes. So I see that too. And we do this test out on the street, and it's amazing. Some people are just like really good at it. They can just sense into it. And then another thing I do is when people kind of struggle with it, I say, create that, recreate that with yourself, like kind of change your face to sort of mirror what it is, and then read your own emotion that's sort of coming up. And that seems to really help people to sense into. And again, here we have what describes this feeling. Person is feeling, they say playful, kind of a twinkling of the eyes. I don't know, does that sound about right to everyone? Let's see, can't see everybody here. Okay, and then another one is convinced, joking, desire, and they say desire. What I would do is have different images here, so we actually take the test. So you've seen these already, so you're sort of it's not too accurate of a test since you already heard the responses to this. And here they say surprise. This is from the other one was from the Cambridge Autism Center. These are from UC Berkeley, the Greater Good Science Center. They have a test that they made it, another version of this. And so they say this is surprise. And then we have someone here and they're saying anger. So, and then we have this other test. So that's a test in terms of just how well you can sense into a picture. And as we're all sitting here, I don't know if you're able to see everyone else, in the same way we're sort of sensing into each other. I can see, oh, are people interested? Are they curious? You know, I'm sort of feeling into, you know, everybody kind of on our square here that I'm seeing. And then the next one is, that was the yawn test, which is out on the internet. This one has like a couple million views, I think, where you just, they give you a series of yawns. And if you know that when you sort of sense into it, you can feel that yawn in yourself, and you can sort of feel how that yawn kind of expands in you know, in your body. And that is sort of an aspect of empathy, that sensing into and sort of feeling the other person. And when it sort of totally takes you over and you yawn, that's, they call that emotional contagion, which can sometimes block empathy. So that was just a quick intro. You know, what we want to do is discuss other-oriented empathy and how you see it expressed in the empathy circle. I'm going to stop there. Let me close this. So this is a bit rougher, you know, the session 2, because I haven't done too much, you know, with getting this, like I said, I want to get the slideshow sort of more developed, but haven't had time to do that. And there's a couple of comments. I'm not reading them in the chat. Does anybody want to say what you're saying in the chat? Are there copyright
But I was saying at
issues?
the end,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
sorry, I don't know, but I was saying at the end, you know about already, about some concerns I have about facial expressions, whether it's possible to accurately interpret the emotion behind them, the feeling behind them. It seems to be a bit controversial. There's an article I posted there. There might be something in that. And as I said before to you, I'd read a book on how emotions are made recently, and this notion is also challenged there. So I understand that it's that it went down well in the empathy tent forum, you know, and that and it is engaging to have visual imagery like that. But I still have these concerns, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, Lou?
Yeah, I think that well, first off, I just want to say I like the examples with whole faces rather than just eyes, because I think there's more to more than just people's eyes in terms of trying to sense what is going on in someone. I also think that the proper context for that is to say, what do you perceive the emotion is here, not what is the correct guess at the emotion. Because, yeah, I mean, whatever people think they are seeing, that's important to raise their awareness about that. And it's a guess, you know, of what the person is feeling. And when you're doing empathy, you're guessing what the person is feeling. You don't know for sure. And I think that kind of gets around the problems of that different people express emotions different way, and there isn't one way that anger looks, and people mask their emotions and all that stuff. Yeah. So it's not, I don't think it's bad to do it, but just to say that it's not like a test with a correct answer. It's a game where you're saying, what is your perception of what the feeling is?
There is the concept of accurate empathy. So within the empathy, you know, the definition of empathy being sensing into, feeling into the experience of other. Accurate empathy is how accurate you are, and there's all kinds of, you know, literature about that. And I think that's part of what the active listening or the empathic listening process does. You're reflecting back what you're sensing in the other person, and you're getting a sort of a check. How accurate are you? And that's what we're trying to do in the empathy circle as the active listener, is trying to get more accurate in terms of that reflection. And sometimes you can sense a feeling in the other person that they don't say, and you say, oh, I feel you're feeling sad, and they say, yeah, you really hit it on the mark.
Yeah, but that accuracy is measured by whether the person says, yes, you got me, that's it, And so you don't have that feedback when you're playing this game with the images. There's no way to know. So you're making the guess, and you don't get to find out whether it's accurate or not because the person doesn't say.
Yeah, that's true. So
you're really only guessing. You're only raising your awareness about what's your perception of what they're seeing.
yeah,
Not,
I see.
not,
So there's
not,
no accurate when they
not
have
do you
four
know?
choices. It's not accurate. You don't know if it's accurate because that
Correct.
person hasn't told you that it's accurate. And
Correct.
so there is some vagueness there. Yeah. Yeah. There is. Yeah. DJ.
Well, Jana just put something in the chat, and I haven't looked at it yet, Jana. But I wanted to, I'm just going to be honest with you about the photos. Okay, I really am uncomfortable with them, and I'm not sure exactly why. I would have to really think about it. But some of the issues have been expressed. But the one with the woman, and she has eye makeup on, and one of the choices is desire. I'm offended as a woman. And so I just have to put it out there, and I'm sorry to be negative. I try to be positive, but I'm just being honest.
Well, this is the space for doing that. So we want to hear what everyone has to say. Any idea, any feeling is totally welcome and appreciated. Yeah. So thanks for that. So next we want to go into the empathy circle to have a chance actually to go into a deeper discussion about these topics. I was going to give about an hour for that, and then we'll come back and debrief and then talk about other, future sessions and so forth. So I made two breakout rooms. We could stay in one. Who wants to stay in one or two? One, two. Okay, majority rules. There we go. So here we go. Lou, would you facilitate one?
Sure.
Then I'll maybe Violetta will facilitate the first one. And so our topic, which is into the chat. We'll have maybe 4-minute turns or whatever's alive. Whatever is alive.
And the topic is feedback on other oriented empathy.
Yeah, what is your understanding of other oriented empathy, and how do you see it expressed in the empathy circle?
Got it.
Or whatever is alive for you. So if you got other things that are feel energized about. And here, so we can have we'll go for about almost an hour. I'll send the notice before we end. Okay, open all rooms. Here we go. Okay, this is us, Violetta.
All right. We will probably use this space, I'm guessing, to talk through some of the comments that are in the chat because we didn't get to all of them. But again, we'll answer the questions that Edwin put in the chat. Who would like to start and choose a listener?
Okay, I can start.
Okay.
And I would like to choose Cara. Will you be my listener?
I'm listening.
How long do I have? I guess what is alive for me at the moment is the article on active listening by Carl Rogers. I previously read the one on empathy as a way of being, but the active listening article was new for me, and it really resonated with me.
So what's alive for you right now is the active listening article, and it really resonated with you.
Right. And I kind of think that we might be an idea to have a module on active listening, or it might be useful to define empathic listening as part of this defining empathy project, because I'm not sure because that's what we do. At the heart of what we do is empathic listening, and I think there is a need to define that too.
So if I understand, you want to define what empathetic listening is, sort of as a tandem to active listening, because it is what we do, and having that definition you think would be beneficial to the whole process.
Yes, so as part of the Defining Empathy project, yes, that we would include empathic listening. And I guess why it resonates with me so much is that this is a skill that I'm using quite a lot, trying to practice and get better at as a coach. And I can see some parallels, between coaching and therapy.
So for you, this is very personal, because it's a skill that you are practicing within your coaching, and you can see the parallels with using that between coaching and therapy.
Yes, and I did the facilitation course relatively recently, just maybe a month ago, and maybe I was asleep that day, but I don't remember going deep into defining empathic listening, and that's my motivation for suggesting that it should be part of the project.
So while you were at an event, you might have been asleep, but you don't remember them really clarifying what active listening is. So you would really appreciate a clear definition.
Yes, and I noticed that we're using the words listening and empathic listening interchangeably. So this article is on active listening, yes, but I am, I guess, talking about active listening in the context of being empathic, and how that can be part of this Defining Empathy project.
So I hear that you want to not split, but clearly define active listening and empathetic listening as possibly the same facet, but different.
Yes, I think there's some exploring there to be done. I and I hear the bell, so maybe I'll just finish with one last thought. Because the Empathy Circle is all about listening, I just feel that there's a need to address that more explicitly in the Defining Empathy project.
So because the Empathy Circle is all about listening, having clear definitions of all terms could just be beneficial to everybody.
Yes, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
I will speak to Crystal. You're on mute.
Yeah.
Okay. Understanding.
First of all, let me just apologize, because I've been biking like 12 to 15 miles a day, and you see me moving. Yeah, my knees, I'm just like, anyway, so I just want to apologize for my action. I'm much more I'm moving a lot. So.
I won't mind you moving around. Okay, what my understanding of other-oriented empathy and how I see it expressed in the empathy circles. So my understanding of other-oriented empathy is really the next step of self-awareness. The things that come up for ourselves when we are listening, really listening to somebody else, understanding that what they are saying and what is coming up for us are not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, your understanding of other empathy in others, how it manifests in terms of what we think we see and they experience is different. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, because it's, it's that small difference between judgment and judgmental, right? Like we're gonna make a judgment. Brain does judgment. It's what brain does. But we don't have to take it to a judgmental place. And that's when your other-oriented empathy comes in. It's being aware of your own hormone soup and meat suit so that you can set that aside and see somebody else.
Yeah, so you're addressing how we see when we're seeing others, that our own, you didn't say biases, but our own judgments, and how we can, we recognize our judgments, but we don't have to be judgmental, and we can own that in the process of empathy with another human.
Yeah, and I think that expresses itself in the empathy circle by the very nature that we, while may change some words, like use a bias, we're trying to see and hear what the other person is saying and doing as best we can.
Yeah, so you're taking the position of assuming good intentions and that we are doing our best from our perspective to see, hear, all of the senses that go into understanding another human. Yeah.
For me, it's very a live topic because I say all the time that I speak English, Spanish, and body language.
So you speak English, Spanish, and body language. So this is a hot topic for you.
Yeah, because there is so much that a person says without having to say a darn thing. And sometimes you can just hear the things they're not saying, but other times what they're not saying speaks so loudly that you hear your own thoughts.
Wow. Yeah, so you're describing that experience of how someone, even when they're speaking and you have this awareness of hearing your own thoughts in unison with them and sometimes not.
Yeah. So I think other-oriented empathy, like the pictures, like that, I mean, it's never going to be perfect because we're not perfect.
Right.
And thank God for that.
And how we come to the table knowing we're not perfect, and we accept that as part of the process of being in the presence of another human.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, who hasn't gone? Edwin.
Violetta hasn't gone.
Oh, Violetta. Violetta, would you be my listener, please?
With pleasure.
Thank you. I was a little distracted. I had a brain haha moment while everyone was talking. And so I was also looking in some books. And I was reading earlier about how language is akin to an organism that must adapt to its environment. And that environment is our brain and other brains.
So you're a little distracted. You were a little distracted a bit earlier, but you were reading about language and how language needs to adapt like an organism to our brain and other brains.
Yeah, and how other empathy is wired systematically by this brain that 90% of the time, as Kara says, makes these decisions and can get it wrong. Yeah.
So you're talking about empathy being done by this brain that 90% of the time makes judgments, and sometimes they're wrong.
Yeah, and so as Kara beautifully shared, our awareness of that is key, and that's why I think it's so important for people in the first or second session of learning empathy to know that there are blocks to empathy.
So that's where you see the role of empathy when we talk about the errors that our brain could make. So maybe in the first or second session, we need to introduce the idea of blocks.
Yeah, and in this book by Marie Fitzduff, Our Brains at War, she's actually talked about this extensively, and I took a note out of it. She said, when we encounter people we consider strangers, our brain switches off empathetic mirror neurons and resist connection with other groups. I'll pause there.
So you're referring to a book by Mary Fitzduff, maybe? I forget. But she's talking about how we turn off our brains at war. Fitzduff, that how we turn off our empathic mirror neurons when we meet somebody we label as a stranger.
And the amount of empathy, I mean, this is a study, this is their conclusion, that we show another is decided by our social relationship, our groups with that person.
So our empathy is limited to how much do we see our connection, our belonging to the same group with the person that we're meeting.
And our empathy or lack of empathy depends on, are we linked in to that group or are we linked out?
And our amount of empathy is probably, is it, according to this study, the conclusion is connected to how are we linked into that group or are we linked out? Okay.
That's why I'm so curious to even see a blind study on empathy, just hearing someone's voice. But even then you have females and men. So yeah. So, and then I just circle back to how can we be other oriented? And I ascribe to this be human first mindset in that as well.
And then you start thinking again about this other oriented empathy and probably about this wider group definition of being a human first.
Right. And for me, it's 5 steps, and I'm totally open to expanding on that. The first one is being aware, and that's that we choose to see with our heart.
Mm-hmm. So that includes 5 steps in this defining being a human. And the first one is to be aware, choosing with our heart.
And knowing, as Kara beautifully demonstrated, that we have bias, we're not perfect. And our brain, it's not our intention, it's our brain. It's wired for assumptions. Yeah.
When we got to the second step, or maybe it's still the first step, that we, first one, we're aware that we have our biases. We are wired to kind of misjudge sometimes. Okay.
I'll stop there. My time's up. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to hear more, but okay. Colin, would you be my listener, please?
Sure.
Me to my time. I'm thinking of more procedure-like concepts. One thought I have is that coming from DJ, and I'm a therapist and a psychologist, I do think introducing a more narrow therapeutic definition of empathy might not be very beneficial for this training. So I'm wondering if we could move away from that at this point, hearing people's feedback. I'll stop here.
So you're reacting to what DJ shared with us in the main room before we went into breakouts, that it may not be helpful to view empathy through a therapeutic lens, And you also shared with us that you yourself are someone with a therapist background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a therapist. I just think it's a different conversation. Rogers himself started from the therapist position and expanded the empathy to a way of being. So it's kind of a deeper reform that I'm considering, but I'm just wondering if we could go in that direction.
Okay, so you're just clarifying that Rogers is a therapist, and that is reflected in his paper on the way of being, a way of being, empathy, a way of being, and yeah, you're just reiterating that you'd like to move away from any therapy connotations.
And I agree with you that other-oriented empathy is clunky. And I wonder if something that Edwin said, kind of introducing the module, is the classical empathy, or what we think first when we think of empathy wouldn't be a better way to introduce this particular module.
Okay, so you're referring back to something that I said in the main room about the title of this module, Other-Oriented Empathy, and one alternative could be classical empathy.
Or something along those lines. I'm open to thoughts about that. And then some of the conversation about copyright. I'm also very cognizant of intellectual property. So that's another thought I had, and I think Edwin gives he does attribute both tests to their authors, so I think it's not a big concern. The copyright, there was a copyright comment in the chat that I wanted to talk about.
Sure, and then you're also referring to something brought up by Wendy in the chat about copyright, that it's important we take care there when it comes to any photos that we use.
Yes. Again, a lot of logistical kind of details, but those are my thoughts at this point. So thank you. I feel fully heard.
Okay, you're welcome. Edwin, would you be my listener?
Listening.
Yeah, my first reaction to the suggestion that maybe we could rename it classical empathy is that it sounds less clunky, for want of a better term. It makes it clear that this is the origins of empathy in terms of it as a concept.
Yeah, you're finding the term classical empathy less clunky, and it sort of clarifies that this is like an original sort of a concept. A historically original concept, maybe.
Right. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that first of all. And I'm not sure where I want to go right now. You know, something that came up for me a while ago is to remind ourselves that empathy is something that can be learned. And I think it's important that we make that clear when we're defining empathy, to give people the hope and the motivation that they can become more empathic, that this is a skill that someone, okay, they may have be born with certain advantages towards being more empathic, but it's also something that can be learned.
Okay, so you're wanting to in the training, you want to really have it conveyed that this is something that can be learned, so people really understand that it's not fixed, it's something that you can learn. It's important to you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And if I was to go back again to the active listening article and maybe share a story about how I was able to practice this in my own life, and without even knowing that I was doing it. I'm not sure even why I'm doing this, but saying this, but it just kind of came up for me a while ago. When I first came to Berlin, I was working with refugees as a volunteer. I'll stop there.
So you've got a story, you're not even quite sure why you're wanting to share it, but it's that when you came to Berlin, you were working with refugees. And
so I was working in, accommodation centers for refugees, asylum seekers coming from places like Syria and Afghanistan. And I was working as like a social worker, but not qualified in that area. And I noticed that I was able to form bonds with some of, when I say bonds, I mean healthy relationships with some of the residents. And I couldn't really work out how that why that was the case.
So you noticed that you were able to develop bonds, connections with some of the people you were working with. You weren't like a certified social worker, but you're just kind of wondering why you were able to develop those connections.
Yeah, and I think one of the main reasons was that I was willing to listen to them, that I was willing to hear their story. And many of them were in really stressful situations, very unstable situations with very uncertain futures. And I was just listening to them and thinking, and they seemed to be happy about that. And I was kind of a bit puzzled sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So you're sort of connecting that active listening maybe to that experience. And it was just, you found that just by listening to those people, they were really happy just to be heard. And you noticed that developed the connection with people.
I guess I had a bit of imposter syndrome. It's like, okay, I'm not qualified in this field, and yet I'm able to play my part here on some level. And I wasn't, as I say, I wasn't quite sure how I was helping them, but it's become clear since then.
Yeah, felt like you were an imposter. You're just listening to them, and you weren't sure how you're actually helping them. But now you have a little bit more clarity. It's becoming a bit more clear how you're helping.
I'm just noticing that I'm sighing a big, deep sigh as I'm saying this because of this realization. And it's just motivating me to want to be even more empathic and to really raise my game.
Yes, you have a big sigh that I think it's that you saw that just listening to people contributed to their well-being, and just it kind of relieves a lot of tension for you, and have a big sigh, and you just want to improve that, deepen that, because it's meaningful.
And I've got this kind of surge of energy going through me, and I feel sad and happy at the same time. And I think it's because I feel heard right now.
Yeah, it's a mixture of feelings going on, that you're feeling sad and happy, and it has to do with you being listened to and heard.
I feel fully heard.
Okay, great. Kara, did I speak to you? Yeah, with the work that we're doing with empathy circles, I try to take it away from the therapeutic. And Carl Rogers is very therapeutic oriented from therapy. So it kind of like, washes over the therapy concept into what we're doing. So it's hard can't help it in a sense.
So I hear that while you're very consciously try to make the division between empathy and therapy, since Carl Rogers was a forefronter in this and he came from therapy, there's a little mingling that happens.
Yeah. And I don't want this to be seen as, hey, we're therapists here, we're being therapeutic and all that. But it's just his work is so good and so foundational. And I even have a little disclaimer at the beginning, just ignore the therapeutic part. It's like, yeah.
So while there is this space between therapy and therapeutic, you've already put in a disclaimer because you don't want to be therapy. It can be therapeutic, but you don't want that confusion.
Yeah. And his work did expand. He did start with, in the client therapist, but he expanded into conflict mediation, into group work, and he talked about empathy and education and, all kinds of different fields. So his vision was a larger vision of using this empathic awareness in all of society.
So while it may have started in a therapeutic place, it has, by choice, expanded from far beyond that into group, into school, into all kinds of human interactions.
Yeah, and what somehow this thing that Colin's saying, hey, I wasn't a social worker, but I found I just listened to people. Rogers had the exact same, in his writing, he says, I kind of ran out of things to do, and I found that just by listening to people, it really worked. It was like, for some reason, it was the exact same experience. That's that listening aspect that was the important healing aspect. Yeah.
So I heard that whether or not you have any training or certification in therapy, being heard, being seen is therapeutic. And that is what empathy is.
And he even, in one of his papers, books, I was kind of surprised that he said, this whole thing of studying there's the whole academic study, of empathy, and this is not to put down therapists, is that he said that is not necessarily important, all the academic understanding. It can give people the confidence so they can listen more, but you can also just have the being very well grounded in it is kind of what's the important part.
So while the academic side has its value, that is not the key part of empathy. The key part of empathy is showing up and listening.
And so the mindset, so that empathic way of being, and it's kind of like what Colin is saying, hey, I just listened to these people and it was like, it really contributed and they felt really good. And so that is sort of that essence that we're trying to get to.
So what I heard was the essence is that the showing up, being present, listening, reflecting, and just being there.
Yeah, and having the skills, of being able to listen are important. And in terms of the in-group, out-group, I mean, there's a lot of talk, the out-group, this bit what Crystal is saying. The out-group, you don't have empathy for them, but you can. It's like, I think that is just a block. In-group, out-group thinking is sort of a block to empathy. That you see the other, you see this superficial stereotype of the other, and you're not seeing their humanity. So it's not like that is a reality. It's just a block, and that can be, I think I experience it can be overcome with seeing the humanity of everyone.
So what I hear is that, to Crystal's point, while there is an in-group and an out-group, thinking of people as an in-group and an out-group is simply a block to empathy. They're just another person you can listen to.
Feel fully heard. Thank you. Mm-hmm. You're up again. You're muted.
I muted myself again. Well, that was weird. Violetta, I will talk to Violetta.
Gladly.
Wonderful. Okay, total segue. I am having the hardest time staying focused. My toddler head-butted me 3 times last night. And while I do not think that my nose is showing any signs of it, it feels like there is a ball inside my face right here.
Your rambunctious toddler, as they're the most aggressive part of the human species, head-butted you in the nose 3 times, not once. And you feel like there's a big ball right here that's blocking a lot of the ability for active listening and focus.
Just yes. So speaking about hormone soup and meat suits, my hormone soup is fine, but my meat suit is quite the distraction right now.
Okay. Yeah, your hormone soup might be fine, but your meat soup is in a mess, a little bit out of order.
And I think that kind of goes to other-oriented empathy. I mean, so empathy, emotional intelligence, I find that they are very much linked. And a lot of it has to do with recognizing your hormone soup, starting with your values and how that affects your feelings, and then how that affects your thoughts, and on up the scale.
So you connect that to the other-oriented empathy because it does begin with yourself and how your hormone soup, how do your values affect your thoughts affect your feelings, and so forth.
So while the hormone soup is something we discuss a lot because it's the unseen things, and a lot of empathy is the unseen thing, I think other-oriented empathy in the empathy circle, becoming part of that could, not a should, but could be recognition of the meat suit. So not just the hormone soup, but how the physically being in a circle and sitting still and listening can change and impact how we see ourselves and others.
So the hormone soup is something that's often talked about because it's this invisible mixture of variables that could affect how we perceive things, but also the meat soup is important as well. How does physically sitting in a virtual circle affect me and you and everybody in that process of empathizing with the other accurately or not?
Yeah, and I don't know how that necessarily needs to filter into this, but I think an awareness of that, maybe a bio break in the middle, because not all of us are amazing like Edwin and can do 16 hours of empathy in a row.
So you think of the training model and the planning. Could we kind of build in some bio break, because not everybody's a superhero in empathy circles like Edwin, and we get tired.
Yeah, I think that especially as part of a training, attention spans when taking in new information. New is scary, period. It doesn't matter what kind of new it is. So taking in new information is a lot for the human to process. And building in some of that other-oriented empathy awareness around giving to it, I think would be beneficial.
So you're suggesting we use other-oriented empathy when we talk about other-oriented empathy, and we empathize with the future students in this course that will be threatened, will feel somewhat threatened by the newness and focusing for long periods of time.
Yep, I feel fully heard.
Okay, thank you. I somehow muted myself as well. I don't know how I did it, but Crystal, would you be my listener, please? I did. Thank you. I definitely talked about. Let me start my own timer. About that fatigue. I think in our first session, that Carrie's talking about, and just kind of keeping in mind that people could get tired being so focused, and especially for a screen. At least for me, screens are very, very tiring. I'm very much not a screen person. So just keeping that in as an empathy, other-oriented empathy, or empathizing with our future students.
You're acknowledging the challenge of people getting tired, certainly on Zoom, and that could in fact be a block to empathy as well.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I didn't think about it, but I love the label. Yeah. Which, if you allow me a little more theoretical kind of rabbit trail, I know I identify as an academic, and I'm still a human being. So empathize with me, please, if you can.
I could share, if we could pause there. So you're an academic and you're also a human. You're seeking empathy as we go down a rabbit trail. Academia, I imagine. Yes.
My comment is, again, going back to a previous conversation about the difference between therapeutic empathy and everyday empathy, and then connection between empathy and emotional contagion that we briefly touched on in the presentation.
You want to address the difference between academic empathy. Wait, I got that mixed up. Can you repeat that, please?
We talked earlier about difference between therapeutic empathy in therapy, and why that would matter for the training at all, and how that connects to emotional contagion.
Right. So you're going to be addressing emotional contagion as it relates to emotional empathy, with a distinction between that and the psychological empathy, right? So a distinction.
Part of my and I realized after last session actually that I don't agree with Rogers that empathy is an individual ability. I see empathy more as a process between two human beings rather than an individual skill.
Oh, so you're acknowledging you see a distinction in Rogers' belief that it's an individual skill versus your belief that it's a process between two people.
Or more than two, of course.
Or more, yeah.
The developmental treating of empathy would include the fact that empathy starts as a group of phenomena early in life that do include emotional contagion, and then grows and has different gradients, different levels of intensity. And I would definitely argue that the empathy that happens in a therapy situation is the most intense, most focused, and most intense type of therapy, type of empathy.
Yeah, and so you're raising the distinction again between everyday empathy and psychological empathy being the most intense, and how it starts at birth. You didn't say birth, but it is a process where we experience emotional contagion, and yeah, it's a process.
The example I when I teach about empathy, okay, I'll talk about it later.
Oh, I want to hear that. Can we hear that?
Okay, I will finish the example. The example is two tennis players, and the more experienced tennis players could follow each move of the ball and each move of the body, and could retell and keep focus, and focus on their own serving and as they're receiving the ball. But newer tennis players would be moving more erratically and would have less focus on each sending and receiving of social signals, because that's what social interaction is. So that's the example that I'm often using.
Yeah, so you used an example of tennis players and some coming in and out, and that whole process. And again, I'm going to put another name on it: chaos theory. It's yeah.
It's more how deliberate I am in every time I receive a ball or send a ball. How deliberate I am about me sending social signals and receiving signals and interpreting those signals.
Wow. So it is with intention. It's how deliberate we are in that process, individually and in groups. Yeah, right.
Thank you. Feel fully heard.
Colin, would you be my listener? Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm feeling like I was adding additional words into her, and I don't think I just did a great job in reflecting back what Violetta shared. I'm just aware of that, and I just need a moment. Yeah.
Okay, so you're just sharing with us that you're not completely satisfied with how you reflected a moment ago to Violetta, and you just need a bit of time for yourself.
Yeah. What she says is so, I'm in agreement with. I believe it's a process that is cultivated, though, by individual skills.
So you're agreeing it is a process, but it involves cultivating these skills, these individual skills.
Yeah. And I think that it's I mean, when I think of empathy, to me, that word, I think of invitation. It's an invitation to experience, to step into another way of being, past, present, or future, where that person is in that moment.
Right. So for you, empathy means to invite someone into a certain way of being, no matter whether that's now, in the future, in the past. Yeah, it's an invitation.
Yeah, and I love Byron Katie's work where she asks you, is this true? When we are othering. And I think her work, although she doesn't use the word empathy, is certainly something in this process of other. Empathy is really important and pivotal in building on Rogers and skills. Yeah.
So you're referring to Byron Katie and the work by her, and although she doesn't talk about empathy, she's talking about something called othering, but you can see similarities there.
Well, it's the work. It's and that's just an example. It really builds on this appendix 1 that on page 9, it's this relationship inventory that Barrett Leonard relationship inventory assessment. And although I think this is cumbersome, I think we could narrow it down to 5 questions.
Okay, you're referring to some kind of inventory assessment that can be summarized in just 5 questions.
Yeah, because I think that people have to be, some people really aren't aware that 90% of their brain is functioning for them, making biased decisions and judgments. And I think that's why DJ took offense. I'm not speaking for her. It's why I took offense at the images of particularly women who could be objectified. And I'm sensitive to that, but also to our judgments. And I just think, you know, it's just a fine line, as Kara shared, between judgments and being judgmental. Yeah.
Right. So you're referring back to the images that were shared as part of today's presentation, and DJ's concerns about stereotypes around women, and how you know, this is coming up as an issue for you right now, and that there's this fine line between judging and being judgmental.
But at the same time, we have to own the elephant in the room. And so I just want to point, if everybody has an opportunity to look at that assessment, that inventory, and page 9, he actually asks questions about gender. I mean, I think race. I mean, these are all social constructs, right, that we've created that now divide. And we have to own that we've created that and honor that history in order to move forward. Yeah.
Okay, and again, you're talking to this inventory and the questions that are there. And these questions around gender and race and whatever, these are all social constructs that we've made, and we need to be aware of that. We need to take that into account.
Yeah. Because I just want to close with this. We are all empathic, right? But if the goal of this is to increase empathy, you also have to increase people's awareness of their biases. And we have to face that head on, I think, in order to connect and have empathy and for people to accept the invitation. Yeah.
So for you, it's important that people become aware of their own biases. We all have our biases. That is a prerequisite to becoming more empathic.
Thank you. I feel fully heard. Thanks.
A few of you already mentioned this. I think maybe pretty much everyone, apart from myself and Edwin, and that is
I didn't hear.
who am I listening to?
Did you
Sorry.
select who you were speaking to, or who were you listening to?
All right. Can you be my active listener?
Okay, listening. You're breaking up a little bit, so yeah.
Okay. So I'm just thinking about how it's important, how a few people have vocalized on the call here, how important it is to make known our needs and to be empathic of one another's needs on the call.
So you see, it's important that everyone needs are important. Here in our call, that to recognize everyone's needs.
Right. For example, maybe having a bio break, maybe recognizing that people may find it difficult to focus sometimes, or that they may not be able to show up as much as they'd like to. That we should recognize that in an empathic way.
Yeah, so be empathic about people's, bio needs and how much they can show up and be present.
So I think just to take that a step further, I think it's important that we model empathy in everything that we do when we're on a call like this or in an empathy circle, not just in the formal empathy circle part, but also in the opening and closing, and also in perhaps recognizing people's needs at the start in an empathic way, and just in general modeling empathy at all times.
Yeah, so you think that in the training we should be modeling empathy at all times, in all parts of the training.
And I'd say it's not that I think that we're not doing that. I just want, I think it's important for us to have the awareness that modeling empathy at all times would be a good way of being, actually. Yes, a good way of being, not just in the empathic listening.
Yeah, so you really want to model that empathic way of being throughout the training, not just when the empathy circle part, but in all the other parts.
And I'm finding it difficult also at the moment to focus, and so I think I'm just going to bring it to a close right now, if that's okay.
Okay, so struggling to focus, like some others have mentioned, and so you feel heard. Okay, I'll speak to Violetta.
Of course.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to the academic aspect. Like, I speak with a lot of academics. I love talking academically. So I want the training to be grounded, and I've talked to you about that too, that it's structured and built in a way that, you know, we can go up against the academics in terms of, you know, the criticisms they may have. So I just want to mention that.
So you're more than ready to talk to any academic that would join the training. And we want to structure the training in a way that it will be sound, academically sound as well.
Yeah, that there's a whole constellation of thoughts and philosophies and out there, so that, you know, I'd like the training to be, you know, aware of all of that and be able to address the criticisms that can come, or the different models and out there, so that we're grounded in that, but that we have that as a foundation, but that it's simple enough that just anyone can sort of, you know, that we sort of abstract enough that it makes it simple and empathic, right? Not overwhelm people, that we kind of create that layer.
You want to acknowledge the whole constellation of philosophies and thoughts and definitions, but also root the whole training in this simplicity. I think Kara mentioned earlier, the simplicity is the closest to perfection. To make it grounded in the empathy circle, and in this way make it accessible to all, academics and non-academics.
Yeah, and that's why I really appreciate you being part of this. You've got the philosophical, the academic, plus the experiential. I think that's a great combination for what we're doing here.
So you appreciate that I am coming with academic, philosophical, which are the same, but and also the clinical aspect.
Yeah. I think that experiential is important, and that's again why we're grounding the definition in the empathy circle here. It's just not an abstract, because abstractions can go all over, or stories. But if we're trying to ground what is actually happening in the empathy circle, we create a, you know, more of a practical, tangible, you know, sort of a training.
But here we're creating something that's deeply grounded in the empathy circle, and that makes it more practical of a training.
Yeah, I think it's that practicality. Like, I also like to be very practical, and that's what I like about the empathy circle. It just seems like the most practical sort of a process that I know of is a starting point. There's so much you can build on this, but it's always like a fallback for.
It's simple enough where we can always fall back on the structure of the empathy circle. It's simple and it's accessible, and we could upgrade it however we want to, but it's always there for us.
And I see that in the family mediations that I do, that, you know, you start with the empathy circle, people start connecting to each other, feel heard, and then at other points you're just talking, and then you feel a conflict happen or something, say, oh, let's go back to the empathy circle, as it's almost like a backstop or a safety net or something like that. You can always kind of have that as a starting, you know, go back to that as the starting point.
You see, the empathy circle is this kind of safety net where we could always fall back into whenever other tensions arise. And you've seen that in your family mediation, you do.
And all kinds of different, you know, experience. So it's not only I just see it over and over again. That's why I'm such a proponent of it.
Yeah, you see it in all of them formats.
Yeah. So that's my turn. I guess there's plenty more, but yeah. So I think we need to close and go back to the full group. So I'm going to hit the end button. Oh, I see. Not end. I'll close this everything here. We want to close all rooms. There we go. Okay, thanks everyone. Everybody's going to come back. Everybody enjoy the exploration. It's an iterative process. I just feel like keep going. It's, you know, a lot of great concepts. I've kind of been making notes of them too here.
Yeah.
Seems like it could have gone longer, but oh, I think we need an hour, 2.5 hours, but maybe one thing we could say is during the break, during the circle, you can always just take a break. It's like if you need to go do a bio break, you're sort of on your own. So that might be a way to address that concern about a break. That
Then I might miss something.
yeah. But we missed what was going on in the other circle too. That's we do have a recording of it. So I guess that's sometimes there's just values that are conflicting. Can't do them all. Okay, welcome back everyone. So we wanted to just go around and just have a bit of a debrief, discuss without reflection, just your thoughts about this session. We don't have any exercises. Are there any exercises we could do, or just anything to sort of, to sort of flesh out this section? Any ideas, and just how is the circle and anything that came up in the circle? You willing to go first, Violetta?
Sure. I feel like we're very much not done with this session. We have a lot of thoughts about how close it is to therapy. How can we rename it? We don't have a lot of exercises. I'm wondering if we could continue talking about it, or maybe in the second time around we could be more specific. Either way, to me it's pretty vague. I'm not quite sure what to take out from this particular session.
Okay, Lou?
We did not record our breakout room. Yeah, so I want to try to summarize some of what we came up with. One was about the name, that the name might be Empathy with Another. And the problem with other, I forget what the current title is, Other Something Empathy. The idea of an other evokes too much like othering people, and that's the opposite of what empathy is. So it doesn't make sense to that's the discomfort with that name. And so Empathy with Another was another way of doing it. And there was the idea that we want to also introduce the idea that empathy doesn't have to just be with people. It's actually empathizing with the whole world, the environment, and every animals and everything. We also had an interesting discussion about congruence, agreement, and acceptance, and whether you can have. I think what we concluded from it is that empathy is not agreeing or disagreeing with the person. So it's not about judging whether they are justified in the way that they're feeling, but more accepting that they are feeling the way that they are feeling, that's empathy. And that while I may not agree with, like I wouldn't feel the same way that they do in the experience that they're describing, I could still relate to the feeling that they're having about what happened to them because of some other experience that I had where I had a similar feeling, where I was angry or annoyed or offended. And that's by connecting with that's I can experience empathy for what they're feeling, not necessarily that I would feel the same way about what happened to them. I think we also, another thing that was expressed was about as if, what's his name?
Rogers.
Rogers, thank you, says as if that being empathic means you have 1 foot in with the other person and 1 foot with yourself, that there's a little bit of distance there, because if you have both feet in, then you're actually in the emotion completely and you're expressing yourself rather than receiving the other person. So that's some of what we came up in our session, and it was a really, for me, wonderful, rich, very nourishing conversation.
Thanks, Lou. Kara?
I found that there were some spots that, and it sounds like both groups were like really, really aligned to some things that awareness of others comes up with its own block, just the words alone, which isn't that fascinating. That empathy is not therapy, but it's a loose definition. So it sounds like everybody kind of wants a little bit more on that front to really define some boundaries around what it is that we're doing and what we're talking about. And I thought that we all kind of realigned or aligned pretty well on the idea that there is a lot of discussion that can be done on the academic side of this and the definitions and what is right and what is wrong and what is according to so and so and such and such. But that the act of doing, the being present and doing, which is what we are here to be doing, is the thing that is so unique and magic, not magic, but magical. You know, that's the difference between judgment and judgmental. Different. Gosh, isn't it a big one? So I was pretty impressed with how well aligned it sounds like both groups really are. I don't think we're done with this discussion. Are we ever done with empathy? But I think that alignment wise, there are some pretty clear things that came from this.
Okay, thanks, Kara. DJ, would you like to go?
Yeah, I think what we did with our group, with Lou, Jana, Wendy, and me, it was very intellectual. And I have to say, it was the most intellectual discussion I've ever had in an empathy circle. And I think that maybe we should do something with it. You know, I agree that we're not done. I think we're onto something really, really, really big, you know, maybe simultaneously in these two groups. And then maybe if we come together at some point and have like a whole big kind of shifting of what's going on here. It's really expansive. That's what I saw. I saw expansion. I mean, Jana talked about using art, and then that got my all going about art, you know, and I'd really love to be able to expand more into art. And so all of that, I just thank all of you for being here and taking time out of your busy, busy, busy lives to be here and to be 100% present. And each one of us is just brilliant and magical. And it's just so great. I feel very fulfilled by this experience.
Okay, thanks, DJ. Colin?
I'd agree with Violetta. There's still quite a bit of work to do on the other oriented empathy, or as we now may be calling it, empathy with another, or even classical empathy. This is a suggestion that came up in our group. It kind of lies out of the whole empathy project. This is my interpretation. This particular session is a really important one to get right. The points that I was trying to make in our empathy circle were around perhaps defining empathic listening. That maybe it doesn't deserve a full module, but it should. I think there's a need for that. Well, I have a need for empathic listening to be defined more in terms of Roger's paper on active listening. I thought that was a brilliant paper. I mean, it really spoke to me. The other thing that I was thinking about is modeling empathy at all times in everything that we do. I think it's not that I have any doubts that we aren't doing that. Of course, there's always room to go higher. So not just in the empathy circle, not just to be aware of being empathic in the empathy circle, but at all times, and in the training as well, in everything that we do and how we show up. It's okay. I should talk about myself. It's how I want to be. I want to be empathic at all times. I will be modeling at all times, and not just in terms of empathic listening.
Thanks, Colin. Wendy?
Thank you. So it felt like a very rich session, and one of the things that will stay with me is the discussion about other modalities than words. so that when we're in an empathy circle with maybe more experienced people, we actually try and express our concepts through sounds or gestures or art, and not just this reliance on words. So that sticks with me from this. And we didn't discuss some at all, I think, what the other group mentioned about therapy and the connection. And I suppose my view is very limited. It's just, yeah, empathy circle, it's not therapy, but it can have a therapeutic effect. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Crystal.
Yeah, I'm still pondering the ball, the tennis ball, and the story that Violetta shared. I think it's a beautiful illustration of all of us coming together. We could play tennis on a wall with a ball, making the ball empathy, and the invitation to play with someone else, and how you have all these elements, as the other group demonstrated, you know, in terms of being empathic to animals that come in to play, and the wind and the sun and our environment, and how we can honor all of that in increasing empathy. And I think it is an awareness of our own blocks. And I think we have to identify those, name those, and build that into the process and not shy away from it. And just one quote that just came to mind is that Georgia O'Keeffe is an artist that I painted one of her, I tried to paint like her, but she says, teach what should be adopted and abandoned. It is only by selection, by elimination, and by emphasis that we get at the real meaning of things. And I think it's what we're doing here. And I'm thankful to be a part of the process.
Great, glad to have you be part of it too. Jenna? You're muted, or do you have space?
There's music in the background, so you can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so Lou did a great job of summarizing it. I thought that since we're talking about the whatever, the others or the anothers, or the this would be a good place to bring in altruism. Lou mentioned that, you know, we don't want to have any kind of demand for being altruistic. That's a tall order, but it might be beneficial here, I think, to bring in the idea of a direction, a possibility, or and also the benefit of being concerned for others. And also I mentioned the Carl Rogers, the caring component of empathy. And I think this is a good place to bring in the caring component of empathy. And caring doesn't actually require, well, I can't say, it doesn't actually require the other person to actually have the experience of another, to be genuinely concerned for the other, or to genuinely care for the other. And so that's always available to us. And yeah, that's all. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. We had a wonderful conversation.
Okay, thanks, Jenna. Did everyone go? Kara, did you go? Okay. So let's see. For me, I made notes there in the document. You know, the things that we covered. The one thing I want to say is Violetta, you were saying, yeah, we have a ways to go. We do. This is sort of a rough draft. The process is, you know, we present a little something. We can do, as a first step, we can do an empathy circle on the topic, and then just keep iterating. So we do go, I was planning on going through all 7 sessions, you know, a rough draft. In the meantime, while we're going through the other sessions, I'll be working on this, you know, sort of fleshing it out, and then go through it again, and just sort of an iterative process to sort of develop it this way. There's a whole bunch of different ideas that have come up to work into the session. What would especially be good is, like, are there any activities we could do, like a little activity? And I haven't, you know, we can do the empathy circle as an activity. Lou, did you have one? Or
Yeah, well, I had two notes. So one was about doing a demo. So with the idea that this was kind of what the class might be like, after you did your presentation of what empathy is, I think it would be good to do a demo of first, like, what it's not. So having, two people, one person speaking and the other person is evaluating them, giving them advice, the things that are not empathy, and then you do the conversation again, and this time you offer empathy to the person, and as a demonstration of what it is and what isn't before people go into the breakout to talk about what they think empathy is. And the other note I wanted to give you was about the art, that art piece of the mother and child art piece, that you need more diverse, different kinds of representations of what two people being empathic with each other is. I would not want it to just be that image, used over and over again as an example, because empathy looks lots of different ways, and it would be between lots of different kinds of people, not just mother and daughter. And I think it's really important actually to show a variety of representations of it.
Okay, let me just get that down. Yeah, I had wanted to be consistent. That's why I used it through each one, is to have a similar picture, for sort of having, I thought it would be, I don't know, something about the consistency of it, but
I think it's important to be consistent with the ideas and the concepts, and not with the representation of them.
okay. Yeah, if you have any other representations that come to mind, do send it to me, like another painting or photo or something. Yeah, great. Yeah, so anyway, the continuing the well, we don't have a lot of time. So should we do a quick, do you need anything for your session? So you're all working on different aspects, do you need any support, around that, or any questions? So Violetta, you're doing imaginative empathy, where do you feel you are with that? And do you need any support? Or
Lou already volunteered to share some thoughts about a role play we could do or two. I have not gotten very far in my work process, but I think I will stick to the more playful version of imaginative empathy, and will not go into what I'm more passionate about, but that's okay. We'll still have fun, and we'll talk about, more empathizing maybe with somebody that's different, maybe an out group, or how to maybe using imagination to imagine being something that I don't have a direct experience of. So.
Okay, and there is, under the way of being, if you go to the, just really quick here, to the defining empathy, there's the way of being page here in defining empathy. If you go to imaginative empathy, or each of these topics, there is a reference. So if you have, one of the things to do on any of these topics is to do your reference check and, add those. There's already a bunch in each of those sections. So I'll just show that.
Thank you for
Crystal, and Lou, both, right, doing your blocks to empathy. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's like a yellow pages directory of people that have already come through your empathy movement, that might have experience in this and bias, maybe some authors, some academics that could help bridge my knowledge gap and how best to connect with them. And so I don't know if that's something that you share, or that could be shared in terms of building up the community when we're all struggling with an issue, just a go-to person. But I'd love to be able to have some dialogue with academics and then people who also experience being linked in and linked out. And so I was just curious if you could point me in the right direction.
For the blocks to empathy, again, if you go to the website, there's the way of being, the model. So there's each of the different facets, and then there's a whole page on the blocks. And this is, pretty much any, there's these are the blocks, and there's the references are Thomas Gordon had done a bunch on the blocks to empathy. So there's some work by him. I think he's passed. And then there's the NVC community has done a lot actually on blocks to empathy, you know, actual pages about the blocks and how they work and actual activities. So that's pretty much what I know. I'm not that tuned into like bias as a block and, you know, the whole literature about that. So
I think what I'm referring to is like, I think Amy Edmondson went through your course. And so in terms of bridging a connection for me to her, that I could reach out because she's very knowledgeable in creating safe spaces to overcome those blocks. And so I was just wondering if you might have a couple of recommendations, but we can talk offline about that.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lou, blocks to empathy.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say about it. I'm happy to be in more dialogue with Crystal about it. And, you know, I need to dive into the document that she drafted that I gave some feedback on, but, you know, I just need to explore that more. I think, yeah, I mean, you know, what's up for me at this moment is just, you know, a question about how much to focus on blocks, because what not to do doesn't really teach people what to do. And I think it's much more important to focus on what to do rather than what not to do. I think for an empathy circle facilitator, being able to recognize what someone is doing and being able to name it, or at least be aware of it and call and ask them to do something different, invite them into something different, that's the skill to try to build with facilitators. But yeah, again, it's much more important to understand what to do than what not to do. And yeah, but again, this is just the thinking off the top of my head. And I know Crystal has a different way of looking at it. Bridges, I want to understand that more and understand how that might fit with what I'm thinking. And I just want to say, Violetta, I'm happy to have more dialogue. In fact, I look forward to having more dialogue with you about that.
So you had said it like in session 1 an activity, which is sort of a blocks empathy model. I mean, an activity where you somebody speaks and you just don't reflect back. You give a judgment or you tell your own story. There's so many, each of these blocks, you can just role play that so you can experience it once. And then the second time you actually do it accurately, right? It's like, you just kind of show the contrast. So I've seen NVC, a lot of the trainings, that's a very common sort of a practice, you know, exercise.
Right. With a focus on how to respond to it by inviting people into the person into something different, as opposed to responding to it with criticism, you know, by saying, what you're doing is not empathy. You're doing this, you're analyzing, you're just, please stop doing that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not being judgmental, reverse judgment.
Right.
Kara, you got to go, or thanks. Okay. Any final comments?
I think you're all just brilliant, and I'm so excited for all of these discussions. I have enjoyed every single second of this morning, and I see you all next Friday.
Right. See you next Friday or Monday, Tuesday. We'll see you. Yeah. DJ, do you want to go? You're looking at the relational empathy. Any questions, comments?
It's big. Relational empathy is big. You know, it includes like everything you can have a relationship with. Maybe the tennis ball, you know, story relates to relational empathy, maybe. I don't know. But for me, I want to include Wendy's ideas, which are also my ideas about empathy with nature, how nature creates empathy, perhaps, and that it plays a role, especially with children, and that empathy could be related to democracy. It could be related to healing the environment. These are all very big things. But then, of course, it's also about, you know, your relationship, like we did another, right? So that's my understanding, that there's just so many different layers to it, and I'm looking at just expanding it. I've read almost all the documents on the website. I've been reading other people's books, like Against Empathy. I read, you know, how that's really going to feed into the actual practice of relational empathy in terms of defining empathy. I'm just kind of seeing it as an expansion, maybe, of wherever people are, just to expand it somehow in some kind of maybe new relationship. Maybe I'm not really into like what it's not, because how can you have what it's not? Because it's everything. So I don't know whether that makes any sense or not, but I know Edwin, I'm going to be interviewing Edwin coming up this week. And so I'll be learning more about what he's thinking about it.
Okay, so the one thing, since this is sort of an iterative process, if we have the topic, you can just say a few words on a topic, then go into an empathy circle like the first time around and kind of iterate that way. And then, so, you know, you don't need too much stress about, I got to have everything laid out, because we're sort of doing an exploration thematic on the topic. So I guess I'm just saying, don't need to be stressed or too worried, because we can just start easy like that. So Wendy, any quick comments?
I'm just in awe, just in awe of how much time people are able to give to this very, very important process. But thank you.
Okay, and Jenna?
I have nothing more to add. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. And Colin, you and I are meeting to kind of go over all this, and is there more?
No, nothing more for me. I felt fully heard in the empathy circle. I was really happy about that, and was able to kind of share something, personal experience, and yeah, it's still working. The empathy circle is still working for me.
Yeah, I saw a light bulb go off at one point there when you're speaking. Yeah, it's great. Okay, well, great. We're all set. Next week, I'm meeting with Priyanka, seeing if there's any assignments to do for the self-empathy, and then we'll be doing self-empathy next week. So until then, thanks everyone for being here. Really enjoying it. It's a lot of fun. My
Thank
favorite
you.
topic.
Yeah.
Favorite
Have a good
process.
weekend.
Bye.
Bye.